Hey everyone, I hope you're well playing and are making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears, but not only me, we have a good friend of mine, someone who has experiences many sides of the industry in different places and spaces, got none other than Liam. My friend, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I liked your places and spaces little rhyme there. That felt good.
It felt natural, I don't want to say that I had a career in rap, but I didn't.
That was the other thing you were gonna do, right? You were gonna write books about rap instead of level design.
Dude, my nickname would be Exotic Vanilla. That was going to be my rap name.
You didn't. You got the best name for a rapper ever,
Was
Max
that?
Pear.
Do you know what? I don't think the pairs would have got me enough respect on the streets.
Dude, MC Max Pears. MC Pears.
MC pairs. Could bring in that vitamin C live every time I spit them bars.
Hey, we all know that's what you need to fight off Corona these days. So you could have been the hot ticket.
Could have been, man. Could have been. I think people eating me though may have not have been how I intended that one. Just drink your bleach and eat a slice of me. Everything will be okay, guys.
Good at him first.
Oh, but absolute pleasure to have you here, mate. Like we've been talking about this for a while now.
Yeah, it's
Well,
so good to be here. Thank you. I'm really, really excited. I mean, we talk all the time, don't we? We're like little
basically,
nerds to each other in Twitter DMs. We're like, oh, how's the games going? How you doing?
yeah.
But we never actually thought to be like, oh, we should just podcast at some point.
It's funny. So me and Liam met back in I think it was 2019, right? At a Tokyo Game Show. I think that was
We
correct.
in person for the first time, but we'd been
Yes,
talking for a while before
before
that.
that. Yeah, yeah, as well. So no, it's been I think maybe even 2018 when we were talking beforehand.
Yes.
So it's been been a very long time actually when I think
Yeah,
about
it
it.
was that weird. I don't know if this is a thing that I find. It's kind of rare to meet British game developers at trade shows in Asia in general, and let alone the wider populace. But when we met, it was like we'd known each other for years. And we're like, "Oh, mate,
Mm.
how's it going?"
Yeah.
It felt really good.
As you find when you finally got that British nature come out and everyone's got good banter, that's when it's like, yep, everything's gonna be a okay from here.
Somebody
So
understands my sarcasm for once.
yeah, like, especially when you're in different countries, as we've talked briefly offline. It's sarcasm can also be our downfall as well as being the funniest moments of our lives.
Yeah, people think you're being mean, but you're not, and they take it in
Yeah.
the wrong context. But yeah, no, it's really good to be here. I mean, I listen to the show as well, and you've had amazing guests on in the past, so I'm honored to also have been asked and included to be here.
No, man. Like I said, I've loved chatting with you, and as I said, we pick each other's brain. We talk a lot about design
Mm.
and different elements, which is always great. So now to be able to talk here to for people to hear and hopefully help the listeners
Yes.
for it, I think is going to be a great one for it. Do you want to give then a bit of a brief introduction to who you are, mate, so people
Yeah.
know your relation to the industry?
Yeah, I can do. So I'm Liam. This is coming almost my 10-year anniversary since I started officially. It's so weird how everybody's initial start in games can be different, and
Mm,
mine was I'd been writing about games for free websites when I was in university. Because I took a computer science degree, but I was a terrible programmer. So I never thought I'd be able to make games. So I decided that I love games so much that I'll write about them instead. So
mm.
I was writing about them, and I got an internship at GameSpot um, when Danny O'Dwyer and the GameSpot UK office was still running.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was doing that first, and this must have been 2010
Mm,
or so. And then I left university, and a friend of mine reached out, and he was like, "Hey, you really are into your games. You know your stuff. Do you want to come work at Rockstar?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah. We got QA positions going on right now. Can you put together some form of resume? Well, I had a resume, of course, but focus it on games or." all of the writing I'd done in the past and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And yeah, so in about, I think it was, I can't remember exactly, but 2011, I joined. I applied a Rockstar, and first time round I didn't get the job. So I
Mm.
went off and did web development instead. And after
Cool.
about a month, I moved to Cardiff in the UK. For anybody who doesn't know, it's in Wales, and I'd been there about a month. I had paid rent for 6 months on a house, and then after like a month, Rockstar called me and was like, "Oh, hey, actually, will you come work for us? We made the wrong decision."
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I was like, "Oh, can I swear? Sorry."
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, I
Sounds
was like,
good, mate.
"Oh shit!" I just spent all this money trying to move across the country, and but of course I was going to take it without a shadow of a doubt. So I packed my bags and I went to go to Rockstar Lincoln, where I
Wow.
joined to do QA.
But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself, to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, and now back to the show.
And I was making my way through at Rockstar. I worked on GTA 5, and towards the end, when I left in 2015, I was working on what would become RDR 2, Red Dead Redemption. I'd done the mobile ports for San Andreas on Apple, iOS, and Android, and Vice City. And then I moved to Japan, where I've been now for 6 years. Yeah, quite the transition from
Yeah,
one
man.
place. And when I moved to Japan, the one thing I really wanted to do was actually start podcasting. I needed a break from games, having done
Mm,
4 years. You and me have talked extensively about working in AAA and the requirements, we should say, uh, of working long time, long hours, and I was very burnt out. So I took some time off, about 6 months from games, and I started doing a podcast called Final Games, which became quite a successful thing. But
yeah,
that
that is really
thank you. And that inspired me to get, because I was talking to so many wonderful game designers, and the one thing that people forget, I think, is when you work at a big studio, you are essentially a cog in a larger machine, and you can get lost in the weeds of things, right? You
good.
yourself have obviously stood out because you do all these wonderful things outside of that, and you're one of the main level designers over there. But in QA positions and smaller positions like that, you are a smaller cog, even so. So I started talking to all these wonderful, famous game designers through the podcast, and it really inspired me to start making indie games and making my own games. And I just didn't know where to start. So I
Right.
started
Okay.
making Unity projects and game maker projects, and I was just learning tutorials through YouTube and stuff like that, and eventually started making my own games, which I would release on itch. And they did fairly well, tied in with the podcast I was doing, so they got more plays. And then all of a sudden, I had offers from studios in Japan to go work for them, and ended up going to Q Games, the creators of the Pixel Junk series. And yeah, I was the game director and game designer over there. There's about 70 people, I think, over there, and I predominantly my time was working on one project. I helped out on a numerous amount of projects, but there were two I was credited as the director and designer of, and one was an Apple Arcade game called Scrappers,
Mm.
which is like a four-player beat 'em up inspired by games like Castle Crashes and Streets of Rage. And you are like these four adorable robots who then go and
Yeah.
collect trash, and You beat up other robots, and it was a really good time. And I co-directed that and designed it. Um, and then yeah, that took me up to about the end of last year, where I decided, do you know what? I kind of like making my own games again. So I left the studio just after being promoted to associate creative director, which was a really exciting role to be given.
Mm.
But you know, the call of making my own games and some opportunities that presented themselves were just too irresistible. So
Yeah, man.
now I'm back out making my own games, doing my own things.
Oh, that must be like an incredible and also nerve-wracking feeling to be entering the wild, right?
Yeah, it is both of those things. Um, it's definitely freeing, of course, right? And we all know the price of freedom sometimes is the financial aspect of that, right? You
Yes.
have to take the hit. Um, but I think having been around for so long now and having had a lot of experience and helped on a lot of projects as well, one thing I really enjoyed doing was I've had special thanks in games like Obra Dinn, and most recently
Oh
a
wow.
game that came out yesterday called Olia, which is made by a Kyoto dev,
Yes. Yeah.
published by Volva. Talking with those guys, giving consultancy about game design, helping out in some way, just getting excited about designing games, and seeing them make their games makes me want to make my games. And the Q Games is great. And I had an amazing time there, and I really thank everybody over there, especially Dylan, the CEO. Anybody might know he was the the main programmer on Star Fox for Nintendo back in the day. Yeah,
Jeez.
he's
Wow.
he's a legend in the industry. Learning from him and learning from other Nintendo legends in Kyoto uh, has been amazing. And I feel with that power now, I've leveled up, to be
Hmm.
cheesy, really leveled up since I started out. And yeah, it's like talking to people like yourself. Just everybody learns from each other, and you keep getting
Yeah,
better,
man.
and you keep learning, and you learn what works for you and what helps to make your games. And yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place now to give it a try and inevitably fail miserably and then go back to doing studio work, but at least I tried. We'll see how it goes.
Well, man, I think honestly the game's going to be, we're not going to talk about it, but I believe your project, mate, is going to do phenomenally well, and hopefully, it doesn't lead to you going back to studio work unless you want to, and you can
Unless I
do.
want to, yes. So that's the operative, isn't it? It's like, unless I want to. I still miss working in big teams. I do miss, I think on Scrappers at one point we had about 15 to 20 people, and working with a
Mm,
team of that size is like perfect. It's so perfect to me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I've got a bit of a smaller team now, but I have a team and I love doing it, and it's such good fun. Making games is great, isn't it?
No, man, I think honestly it is, and it's for you to finally. Oh, just hit my mic with just anger, but no, you to be able to go through, mate, and make, finding what you want to do, and as you said, like the reason not everyone gets to do this is financial restraints.
Yeah.
So for you to go off, and you've put hard work, right? This wasn't just someone rocked up in a Ferrari and was like, "Hey, kid, want to make a game?" Like this is through your hard work, your connections, working and learning different engines, and how to
And that's
best utilize.
and you're 100% right. It's like the opportunities that have presented themselves have come off the bat. It's always hard to admit to yourself that you've done hard work, right? Because
Hmm.
anybody can do hard work if they do it. But it's hard to admit to yourself that actually maybe you've done more work than other people. That's why you are doing what you're doing, right? So in my case, like what I've done is, even when I was at Q or even when I was at Rockstar, I would always be working on other projects. I'd
Yes.
always be learning stuff. I'd always be trying to do stuff, and I'd essentially be trying to carve the path that's coming up in front of me to be closer to what I want exactly. And even at Q, thinking like if I was going to pitch projects internally, or I was going to, think about what are the games I want to make, and how much. The one thing you have to do when you're in charge of like creating projects as a studio is you have to realize that you're not the single entity. You are going to have
Yeah.
to give and take with other people to understand how to make a project come alive. So whatever you present as like A, which might be your hard blood, sweat, and tears, like the project you really believe in, by the time it comes out, when it's an entirely different project. It's been touched by so
Mm,
many people, it's been chopped and changed, and ultimately you could be very, very happy with it. And also on the flip side, you could be very, very uh, sad about it, for lack of a better word, because it's
yeah,
maybe not the vision you had. But if you do the hard work and you learn how to make games yourself, and you learn about how to then pitch to publishers, and you learn how to market your game and contact the right people, then it is possible that you can go out and do it by yourself without then having to uh, sacrifice your own vision.
yeah.
So yeah, but I do miss working with big teams and stuff like that. So it's really cool. I'm really excited for this year. I'm back in like the early phase of making a game where you're like anything is possible, but also at the same time, oh my god, this is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, man, it must be a different feeling. And as you even just touched on there, like how games change, right? Even knowing that, your game will change a bit, not necessarily because of anything, was bad or out, but due to the fact that games change. Even the best we've spoken about this is like theory is one thing, but putting it into practice, sometimes it yields
Yeah,
different results to what you had. And to have that pressure for yourself, for like you're now making the decisions, you've got to buckle down and say, hey, this is where we're going. It must be pressure.
it is. But it's something I really like. If there's one thing I've realized over my time, especially in the past couple of years, making my own games and trying to stick to a
Yeah.
scope, and then also being in charge of projects at Q Games, is that one of my good skills is the ability to see the bigger picture. I think one
Mm.
of the things that people don't understand about video games is that people kind of live in the moment, right? They live in whatever tasks they have right now. This animation, or I'm trying to implement this thing right now.
Mhm.
But understanding the bigger picture of how long that time is going to take to finish that task, then if that task is taking too long, how does that affect this week's tasks? If you're behind this week and it falls into next week, what happens for this month? And then if this month is delayed and your milestone's coming up, what affects that milestone? And then what affects the big? I've learned to understand maybe the bigger picture of a project and be able to keep my scope in check when making
Right.
projects. And it is these kind of things that the more you learn stuff like that, the better you become as like a director or a project manager. And that means you could be the best game designer in the world, but if you're not on time and you're over budget, or you're you've spent 12 months making the best animated combat scene in the world, but you have no game modes,
Yeah.
you're failing really badly. So it is kind of a balance of like, okay, I can panic about these features, but I have to have a cool head and I have to stay strong and I have to be like, oh, we need to just cut this right now, and we need to finish
Yeah.
this. Even in my own game, I don't want to compromise on the vision I have for the bigger picture of it and what I want people to play. But at the same time, I want it to be released on time and I want it to be successful because it was a good game made in a small scope, or something like that.
Yeah, man. I think it's like you're saying, it's we've spoken about this, but having, your design pillars, right? Like having that core vision,
Yeah.
things may slightly swerve left and right, but they will always adhere to the core of it, and making sure that you've got that, and the balancing act. Because here's the other thing people keep forgetting about, especially, we've said this stuff offline with people on Twitter, is that games still are a business, and that's the sad truth in many ways. But by having these constraints, whether it be deadlines or financial constraints, it also helps you to make those decisions you feel that are sometimes the best for the game, and that's part and parcel of making games as well.
100% right. I am a absolute romantic about the games industry. I love what we do. It's part of the reason I stay in Kyoto, because I literally still get massively excited and nervous because there are Nintendo legends walking about, and I
Mhm.
bump into them and meet them, and I'm like, oh my god, he worked on Mario 64, or
Yeah,
Oh, you know, when my boss and other people, well, my ex-boss Dylan at Q would, talk about all the old Star Fox days and stuff like that. That kind of stuff is what I absolutely live for. And
Yeah,
I'm an entire romantic about game design, and you and me nerd out about this stuff. But you're right. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to sell games to keep going. And if you are
yeah.
working with publishers, or if you're working in a studio, you have to pay staff, and you need the money to recoup so you can pay the publisher so that you can make another project. And it does come at a cost. I think the best model in the world is what Soccer Pop do, where they literally have a Patreon that pays for them to just prototype every month.
Oh
And that's
yes,
amazing, right? That would be my
yeah.
dream. That would be my dream if people were just like, hey, we're going to pay you to explore all of the weird, crazy game design ideas you have. I would absolutely sign up immediately to do that. But that's not me, right? I think they are doing amazing things, but their model does restrict them to not be able to make like bigger commercial titles, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/level design lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
so it is a double-edged sword, and I love what we do, but sometimes, you got to think, what is the best thing for this project, right? What is going to keep this project alive and progressing forward? We don't want to get bogged down right now. And sometimes that requires, understanding better skills that maybe conflict with what your dreams are. Being a project manager or being a director, you need to sometimes even say to yourself, like, do you really need to keep working on this level? Do you really need to keep thinking about this animation? Do you really need to
Yes.
keep doing?
No, I completely agree because like at a certain point the reward, right, it drops off.
Yeah.
The investment of time that you put in versus the what the player will get out of it, like it's a tough one because as creatives, right, like especially when you're in a bigger studio, and as you said, you've got more of your single focused task because that's
Mhm.
like you said, got tunnel vision on that. But
Absolute ton
obviously,
of it.
there's like bigger pictures out there. But when you've got that sort of thing where you're like, yes, no, this is going to be perfect. I want to make the perfect animation. Like there's a joke I always joke around, especially with game artists, because they want to make the best looking visually
Yep.
game, and it's completely fine. Like no qualms if suddenly this is turned against me, and everyone's like, Max despise game artists. No, like the thing is, I always joke around is I'm always saying like, what are we making? A game? All right, this isn't a portfolio piece. This is the video game, right? So we have to balance gameplay versus art in a specific example. So you've got to keep that in mind. And as we said, the time versus the payoff may not always be in favor of it.
Yeah. And it's sad, right? You want people to do their
Yes,
best work.
for
Of course.
sure.
It's like when people are like, oh my God, I've been making, the final level of the game. It's taken me like 6 months. I'm like, you do realize like only 20% maybe at max are going to see that final level. And
Yes.
so frustrating to have those things be things in your head that you think about. And but it's the reality of making games, and you have to just focus all your attention on what are the things the player is definitely going to see, what are the things
Mm,
the predominant user base of the game are going to play, and then everything else after your MVP, like your minimum viable products, is just goofy, lovely, nice game design things for you, right?
yeah.
And That's just unfortunately the reality. But there's so much you can still do with that. You can still make a great game by focusing on, okay, well, maybe I can't make this massive dramatic final sequence of my game that, ties all of the narrative knots together, gives the player the moment where all of the skills they've learned through the game in this final climactic moment, they can do it. Maybe because only 18% of people are going to see the final boss. But what I can do is I can make the best damn tutorial and the best opening sequence ever. And then already you've won most players' hearts, right? And I feel like we just have to prioritize sometimes some of the things we do.
I think that's bang on. And I think that's also why like people don't necessarily realize this, because they think, oh, games are made. They think because the way that it's presented, same with films, beginning, middle, end, they think
Yeah.
that that's how they're made. It's not. That
Oh,
normally the tutorial is the last thing that's made in
it
the
is
game.
always it's at the
Yeah,
absolute last.
for sure. And
How can
it's
I have you play a game? How can I make a tutorial for a game that I haven't even made yet? How
yeah,
can I teach you about something I don't even know exists yet?
and especially when you want to show the best, like you said. Okay, so not everyone's going to reach that last section, but how do I make the impact at the beginning so important that it will hopefully drag a higher percentage to continue? Because also the other thing is, man, tutorials can be a killer of people playing, because they want to master as quick as possible, right? They want to get into either the narrative, the core loop, whatever it is. So making that tutorial fun, or not even necessarily fun, such a big broad word, right? But
Yeah.
like, and engaging for players to be like, whoa, what am I doing? I mean, like, look at Undertale, for example. That tutorial, in many ways, I wouldn't call it that engaging with, say, um, the gameplay side,
Yep.
but the narrative side, the fact that the character is named Tural, I've forgotten her name. The
Yeah. L'Oreal or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a play on it, right? Like even the flower attacking you at the start, brilliant. It's
It's
those
yeah.
little things.
It grabs you in a different way. It just grabs you
Hmm.
narratively and comedically, and you're like, oh, okay, I get what this game is going for. Okay, maybe the gameplay
Yes,
is not such a big part, but I understand what the narrative is going for.
exactly. And those are the things you've got to think about. But again, man, you're not going to see that until until the game's finished.
And you're not, and that's the thing is nobody talks about Undertale like, oh, do you remember the giant bullet hell sequence RPG mechanics? Nobody talks about
Yeah,
that. Nobody talks about the narrative, right? So what would be the best idea for the tutorial would be to try and show off the kind of comedic narrative the player is going to experience throughout that game, and hint a little bit at what the gameplay mechanics are.
yep, yep. Oh, exactly. And just, I mean, that game as well. Like when we talked about budget and time, right? Because I think it was a second or third attempt till I actually like played it all the way through, and that
Okay.
was because of the art. Personally, like the
Yeah.
first area really just put me off. But again, once I was like more engrossed with the story and everything, please, this isn't a dig when I say that. Art is obviously personal, and to me, the start area, it's meant to be bland, right? That's so when
Yeah.
you finally leave the door,
G dungeon. Yeah.
yeah, it reveals the excitement of the world. The different, like Sans, my favorite character, he's just hilarious. But these and the little like dog Pomeranians, they were. I'm assuming they're Pomeranians. They might not be, but they were adorable in so many ways.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things though where they've made that choice for a reason. Some will be
Mm.
financed because it was Toby Fox, and I've forgotten the girl's name who helps the art. I'm really sorry. Um, yeah, she they do such amazing work on it. It's fantastic. You're just
It's
like,
interesting. Something you said then just reminds me, like, why we shouldn't perfect these things and why you need to understand. And I literally have it written on a whiteboard all the time, which is scope
mm,
and what the bigger picture of everything should be. Obviously, you want your game to look the best, you want it to sound the best, you want it to absolutely play the best. For me personally, a game playing well is my absolute prerogative. So that is the space I'm going to put the most time into because I want it to feel the best game feel. And core loops are like my entire wheelhouse. That's what I focus on. But like you saying with Undertale, you were put off by the art, but you got through it and then it becomes not a problem. And I
Yeah.
think that happens with more players than most people realize, which is that you shouldn't be polishing these things so much that you've wasted time on everything else, because players are going to just get through abrasive things that they don't like if they're enjoying your game as a whole.
Yes.
It-
Bang
and
on.
I think that's really important to like, I spend time with programmers who are trying to write the perfect thing, or they're like, oh, but this doesn't transition the way I want it to, and I'm looking at, I'm like, I honestly do not care. Just it does it, right? It does the mechanical thing. It might not do it perfectly, but I need you to move on to fixing something else, or
Yeah.
creating something else. And sometimes you just need to make those sacrifices. It's like, is it good enough? Okay, it's good enough. Let's go. Let's do
Yeah.
this.
Uh, that's always
Done.
the toughest bit, right?
Yeah, it's always the toughest bit. But if I look at it first time and it doesn't look bad, like if it doesn't look actively bad, I will more than likely just take it,
Yep.
because then you have so much time to do so much more. And you can always, and this, this is the other funny thing, is that if you are on a good schedule, which is rare, and you have time to go back, you go back and fix the things that you thought could be improved. But at
Correct.
least you got to a point where the content's in the game, you're at content lock, you can play it from beginning to end, you can get to the end of the game and have a really enjoyable experience. That's fine. Then if you have additional development time, go back and polish those things instead of polishing them as you go along. If it gets to a point
Yeah.
where it's just good, then just move on.
Exactly, mate. It's exactly that. It's the value of it and how much is it going to add, and
Yeah.
understanding play. Like the best example for me that made me just think about art differently. And now I know people are going to be like, Max hates art, etc. I keep saying examples of them now, but
I love you, artist. Listen to Max.
yeah, I love all of my art friends. Honest, the it was Thomas Was Alone. The amount of like empathy and character connection you could have with these characters, which were just squares and rectangles, was insane because of the way that the narrative was delivered. The gameplay felt right, and not every game will be that. This does again. This is not my purge of art. This is what I'll call the episode, the art purge. But this is it just makes you realize there's so much that goes into games, and as you said, mate, at a certain point, as long as everything else is flowing and
Yeah.
people have found that hook for it, whether that be the core gameplay, the competitive nature, this the want to improve your own skills for this, it will help you move through as well. And look,
It,
having a good
yeah,
art game helps too. There is
of
no
course.
no qualms.
That's the thing, is like I said recently to, I've been trying to, hire an artist and a sound designer. And when people see the game for the first time,
Hmm.
they will not see anything other than my idea. They won't see the larger contribution I've made, which is, as the director and the designer, is the tiny gameplay feel, right? And the
Mm,
moment to moment experience they have. The first thing they're ever going to see in a trailer is the visuals and the idea.
yep.
And the sound as well. So the visuals and the sound are so important in that aspect.
Right.
In that aspect. But when it comes to the wider like completion of the game, and this is not to diminish those elements, because animation, I think animation is incredible, probably the most important to me personally,
Hmm.
um, is the moment to moment gameplay.
Yep.
And you can
Hmm.
have a game like one of my favorite games, like that blew me away because it's totally a game I don't usually play, is A Short Hike. I think
Oh yes.
a short hike is like a mastery of design to me for so many reasons. And it uses a low poly shader to make it look like basically an old PlayStation 1 game. So
Yep.
you don't see the emotion of the characters, you don't see any of the intricate animations, but it gives it an aesthetic that you remember. not necessarily the aesthetic that everybody loves. It's sometimes difficult to see, but it just means that it's not important to convey still the message of what that game is trying to do, which is through text and also through the moment to
Yeah,
moment. So you can, get by. And that game was made in like 8 months as well. So
insane,
exactly, right?
absolutely insane.
These things are possible. And I'm a big fan of let's make more games. Let's experience and
Mm,
experiment with more ideas. And if we stick to pretty rigorous schedules and we are more kind to ourselves about letting go of something being perfect and letting go of, okay, this isn't quite what I'm going for, but it's good enough. And just letting that happen, we can get to a year development or a year and a half, and then we can go and explore the next idea, right? And then we can learn from what we did then to better the next project, right? And it's almost like you're sacrificing each project as you go along for the next project, but you're always improving anyway. So why not
hmm
just try to explore those ideas? So I'm a big fan of being able to do that. And it comes with having to, learn how to project manage correctly almost.
Oh yeah, I think it's a great point you peeled you pointed out with the trailer, right? The first experience someone's going to have with your game. I
Yeah.
don't know. Have you seen the channel Game Dev Unlock,
Yes,
which
I
is
have.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah about for those who don't know, it's a great YouTube channel from why I've forgotten his name. I've spoken to him and I feel really bad. But he's wait, I'm just making friends in this episode. I'm just making
This episode's
friends.
going to be called Liam, my last friend.
Yeah, exactly. My last friend, what a name for a game. It is a he talks about like his experience and how when he did his trailer and was tweeting stuff out, how the art and the sound like really helped him gain momentum with his following to then obviously lead to sales later. And
Yeah.
I think that's, to me, it's always fascinating to see this because we talk about big studios being a cog in the wheel. I will say this now, and not in a bad way. This is a matter of opinion. So no, I don't want to see anyone try to fucking cut this snippet out or anything. When there was like trailers for Cyberpunk, right?
Yeah.
There was things that I was like, maybe I would have done that trailer differently. And again, not because it was bad, just because how I would have done it differently. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean better or worse, just different. And I think I was reading somewhere on Gamma Sutra, someone had done like a really interesting, like a three blog post like announcement of like how they make the trailers, what to them are they trying to sell, and it was just fascinating because it's it's only there right when you're in charge, like you're doing so now. I know
Yes.
Hideo Kojima will tweet out he's the only only
He's
director editing his trailers, but the the element of that is a gigantic pressured task of, well, okay, how do you get them to experience the core loop without actually ever touching the game, right? Like it's such a important task that I don't think we necessarily think about because it's different to a movie trailer. Book
Yep.
trailers are very different,
Yep.
all of these things. So how do you get your unique selling point across?
Yeah.
And
Unless your game has like a very specific ISP or like a
Mhm.
niche, right? Like I made a game called Curse to Golf and it's a golf roguelike. And I, looking at it immediately, you're like, oh, okay, I understand, right? It's very easy.
Yeah.
But if you have something that's a bit more difficult, if your game is an action combat game, right? How do you get across that your action combat is different and feels better than
Yes.
other games?
Do you know what I don't envy, but also would love to try? Right. So Final Fantasy, they always change their combat system,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of like I've used it always like 7 times in my sentence. I'm just confused, inspired by the choices behind that because there's incremental changes, but comparing 15 to 7, that's quite a big leap already as it is. Let
Huge.
alone 14 to 15, 13 to 14, and all this. I know 14's online, so it's a different one. But even just the more single player games, I'm just like, what are you what made you choose that? And I always think RPG combat systems, because there has to be so much depth to it, right? How do you figure out? Sorry, this is a complete tangent, but I'm just so, it's always one that I've just sat and scratched my head over. How do they do this? Why are they doing this? Right?
It's funny because with that kind of thing, we just we talked about the business side, right? One thing you don't do is reinvent the wheel every time you make a new game. You take what
Hmm.
you learned and you try to cram in as much of what you've already created into a new game without it being abrasive, because the player is going to be like, oh, I played this in your other game, or I've seen this animation before, right? And
Yeah.
gamers get really picky about that kind of thing. The
Mm.
Pokemon stuff a couple of years ago, when they were like, oh, this sprite, oh, this animation looks exactly the same as this game 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That generally is how game development works. But in terms of like literally reinventing your entire combat system every time you make a new game is quite ballsy to me. Um,
Mm.
but I guess when you have production of that scale and that size and you almost start from scratch every time, I guess it gets easier to just be like, well, we tried it in a game 20 years ago. Let's look at that as our inspiration and try and make a new one. But yeah, it would definitely be easier for them to just stick to one good combat system. Like Final Fantasy VII, the remake, I think has the best combat system in all Final Fantasy, personally.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, if you totally do that for 16, we've seen that it's kind of like The Witcher. It's kind of like action combat focused. They
Yeah.
hired the Devil May Cry combat designer from Capcom.
Oh,
Like,
did
if
they?
you,
I didn't know that.
yeah, they did, yeah. If you just take Seven's combat that you've already made and make it a bit tighter and a bit more refined, then I'm totally on board. But it seems like they're just like, nope, we'll just reinvent the wheel again. We'll make something
Yeah.
new.
Well, it's an interesting one that raises the question, right? Because when you look at Last of Us Part Two, the elements of gameplay they added were quite minor, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, as in the changes, right? The big changes where you could slide through open objects and crawl under as well, so just getting in smaller gaps. You obviously had new enemy types as well, but the overall stealth and combat were roughly the same. I'm sure there was certain things changed behind the scenes, and the
Yeah,
feeling is better. And that was fascinating me, just for me as a player and as a developer to watch, because we talk about, do you like do you always need to add something new? What is the new thing you need to add? I don't know if you ever played Parasite Eve, mate. Like, that was
yeah,
back in there.
yeah.
So when you look at how that changed, and it changed so much again every iteration, it was like almost a lesson in, it's hard to pick where do you go in increment. And then the other question is, does it need to change? And when you're working on sequels, again, just fascinating stuff, really,
Mm,
to me.
yeah, with The Last of Us, you got to, I imagine internally, obviously that game took a long time to make, right? Because they're
Yes.
tech insane. And I personally, please don't hate me, everybody, I don't like The Last of Us games. I don't. I
Mm.
have very strong opinions about their design philosophy and yeah, as a game. But I think it's very easy to look at them and be like, well, what do players want from The Last of Us?
Mm.
And it's not gameplay, is it? It's
No.
not. It's the narrative, right? They play for the Ellie and Joel story. And so when you're making The Last of Us 2, you're like, okay, well, we can do some experimental things, but we don't need to change the basic systems. Like, players understand how to shoot, craft, crouch, etc. Like, we'll keep all that, and then we'll just make and spend most of our development time creating this brand new narrative. And I feel like,
Yeah.
that's super smart. What I like in other studios, like let's take Platinum Games, for example, who make like
Mm.
a different new IP every time they make a new game,
Yeah.
which is an insane but really exciting way to make games. But it comes at the cost of, well, you make Bayonetta once, and then the next game you make is a third person cover shooter where you slide across the ground. And it's like,
Yep.
where is the correlation between those two games? And how the hell do you make an engine or use an engine and have all of the tech that you've already created and then make that new game? It's crazy
Oh,
to me.
and their movement in combat, right? Like,
Oh, so good.
it's, even if you may not overall like the games, like that stuff you have to respect of theirs, just because it's so, like you said, good, so different, and just, I mean, that's their core, right? Their core is the combat, like Astral Chain. just the feeling of not only attacking but tying them up using different sticks to affect that.
And that's where it goes, right? Then you talk about, okay, so what do players expect from Platinum Games? Well, they
Mhm.
expect really good combat, but they expect different combat
Yep.
every time. So then, unfortunately for them, it is a case of, well, this is the expectations we've set for ourselves. This is what we have to do. And then, they're not known for their narrative, and the games kind of look similar. They're very anime inspired.
Yes.
Um, they don't tend to be the most 4K hyper textured things in the world, right? But they have incredible animations, they incredible game feel, and then that is what their focus is. Um, and I think it's really important when you're a game creator. What is your strengths and what do people expect from you? And are you
Mhm.
going to deviate from that? There are so many times I've thought about making games in different genres. Like I'll make one game and then I'll be like, okay, the next game I want to make, I want to be an entirely different thing. But then
Mhm.
I realized, I'm relearning how to do that. And it's maybe not the most efficient thing to do. And it's also not what people would expect from me. Um, so is it the best idea to do something like that? I don't know. It's fascinating for sure.
Yeah, it's a whole side tangent, but just one where you're like, God, there's is it the right thing? Is it not the right thing? Just the
Well, prioritizing, right? It's like, what are you? It goes back to the business side. Like, am I making money? Okay, I need to make money to make games. Okay, what is popular right now? What could I do that could make money? What a publisher is going to buy? What is the studio going to fund? And then you have to play to your skills anyway, because being a complete
Mhm.
wild card and just making like some crazy Death Stranding is not always going to work for you.
Yes, I mean, I'm happy that game sold well because the impact in the industry is hopefully we can get more games broader scales for it. So you just don't
It turned
know.
out worth it because I remember very clearly when we were talking at TGS, our conversation got broken up by Hideo Kojima.
It did. He knew. He was like, "Boys, I'm gonna have to step in a minute," and he
We were
was.
just happily talking about game design in Japan, and then all of a sudden Kojima's like, I want to sit on that bike.
Yeah, oh, dude, I remember now, dude. All right, let's talk about this because this is always the funniest part, and I don't know if it still has the same impact on you now that you because you've lived in Japan for 6 years. So TGS was my first time there, and it was
Yeah,
my first time in a conference out in Asia.
yeah.
And wow, is it so different to like E3 and other ones? And the, I felt like an asshole here because like Yoji Shinkawa was there, and how do you not like his artwork? Is the real
Yeah,
question. And I'll
incredible, right?
fight any of you who disagree there. But and I felt like an asshole because like excuse me, because everyone is so respectful in a more calming way in Japan. Like no one asks for anything there. They might just follow around, but they give enough space.
Yep.
I've seen Miyamoto and Kojima in E3. Let me tell you, they have got an entire circle of bodyguards around them. It is the strangest thing to witness. Like that's how I saw Miyamoto for the first time through like a hole between him and his bodyguards. I was like, what is going on? But in TGS, they were walking around freely, and I asked for a picture, and it was the funniest and weirdest thing because no one else was doing it, and I was like, I'll take my chance. But I realized super fast that's not the way you do it over there.
No.
And the next thing that I want to talk about is booth babes because that thing has been cut out rightfully
Yep.
so in my opinion.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, in the West. In Japan it was like stepping back all the way to like 80s or
Yeah.
something. I was the funniest thing of this is so people who will go here, I have never seen so much expensive camera gear on some of these lads, and they are like taking a lot of pictures.
A
I
lot
remember
of it.
I walked past one by mistake, but there was no way to go through. It was just through there, sadly. Trust me, he'd taken 15 photos before I had gone through. I played respectfully, but his reaction, so annoyed, and just how some people just come for the booth babes and what they're wearing, who they
Oh,
might be
yeah.
versus the game,
Yeah.
insane. Does it
It's
still have the same? Like, it would still feel different for you, mate?
so. I mean, I'm going to throw out there immediately. I hate TGS. I really don't like it. So that's funny. The Tokyo Game Show is when I first went, it was, I imagine the same for you. It's this magical, weird experience where you're in Japan, which is an incredible country to be in, and you're at a game show in Asia, right? You've grown up playing Nintendo games your entire life, and all of a sudden you find yourself presenting a
Hmm.
game in a
Hmm.
foreign country where you are inspired by. And that's an amazing thing. But then you realize and you look around and there's like, oh, most of these are mobile developers I've never heard of. They're companies from China and Korea with mobile titles that are all gacha games, and they just have tons of booth babes. And you're like, oh, this is weird. This is really weird.
Do
So
you,
it's
so you
not
got me.
great. It's not great. TGS isn't, but Bit Summit, which is the Kyoto Indie Festival we have here,
Mhm.
which become bigger and bigger every year. Now it's like 30,000 people or something stupid. That is amazing, and I feel like that truly is the magical experience people should have in Japan when they are an indie developer or a video game developer, and they come over to Japan because that is it's a million miles away from what TGS is.
So, do you know what you mentioned that is like I went to China Joy as well, and you're talking about mobile games.
Yeah,
I felt so out of place presenting because I was with there for Cyberpunk, presenting that there
yeah.
again just because of more games were mobile, and that's generally how the Chinese market is. It's a lot more mobile focused than it is console and
Incredibly
PC
so.
focused.
Most of Asia, yeah.
Hmm. And that was a such just an eye opener. She's like, whoa, because the way we view games in the West mobile games, and I say this as someone who used to work on mobile games as well, is slightly different. Like it's we have some amazing hits out there, you know,
Yeah, we're not
us
yeah,
too.
we're not talking about Cannibal or any of the
Yeah.
really good mobile games. We're talking like anime gacha gambling.
Hmm. Yeah, oh, the gacha thing, like that to me, people are talking about loot boxes, like is this gambling and stuff. Gacha is just basically gambling. Like,
Straight
it's
up a problem.
yeah,
in
with
Japan.
just with waifus on it. It is just that.
I'm glad one of us said
Yeah,
it.
someone had to, man. You can't talk about gacha without that coming up eventually. But it's
Yeah, and
so.
the thing is, that's why they understand that to get traction on those games is really difficult. So, well, playing to one of Japan's weaknesses and one of Japan's problems, which is sexualizing young women
Mm,
to a really creepy extent. If
yeah,
you have every magazine in Japan and you have the photographer just taking photos of a woman that has branding of your game on it, well, inadvertently your game is going to get advertised in those magazines when the pictures get printed out. So that's why it still continues. Otherwise, I think if they didn't have it, those photographers just wouldn't be there. I don't think
hmm,
the coverage would happen the same, and for better or for worse, unfortunately.
yeah. It's such an interesting one, just how it all works. Like, because I got interviewed by like a VTuber or like a virtual TV presenter as
That's
well.
so cool.
Dude, it was the weirdest thing ever because like I can't see her.
I
And
I want to live my life being interviewed by VTubers. That is the pinnacle of just what has my life become.
do you know what makes me feel like even like weirder is like sadly because like you know, VTubers has obviously hit a boom over 2020,
Yeah.
and this is before it. And I was like, damn it! Like if only we timed this soon, like a little bit later, this would have worked out even better. But like so she spoke fluent Japanese. She didn't speak English. Obviously, I don't speak Japanese,
Oh,
and it
really?
was. I
That's
know, right? Surprise! I know many of you are like, but Max, you strike us as a man who speaks fluent Japanese. But it was like so strange because so there's a couple of things just leading up to that. It was like the award ceremony of TGS, and I was going to
mm,
represent Cyberpunk, and I got to chat with the game director of I hope I pronounced it right, Neo Two, you know, NIOH, the
oh,
one
Neo.
where
Neo too.
that's it, Neo Two, yeah. He was such a lovely lad, and learning also about the card, like the business card culture, was a
Oh,
huge
Meiji. Yeah.
moment.
Even your
It's-
Meiji. I have
Yeah.
in my desk I have a few prize Meishis. I have a Koji Kondo's Meishi, the guy who
Wow.
did Mario music. So I keep them
Wow.
in my desk as little, like almost little prizes for myself.
It, it's such a very interesting one, man. Very interesting. Just the respect given to it, and making sure you put yours lower as well was like a whole etiquette. I was like, oh, here you are, and it
Somebody
was just,
is abroad in Japan videos.
hey, bro, I'm here. I'm here. Fluent Japanese, bro. Fluent Japanese. So before we get on, the first award goes to Yakuza 7, and their creative director goes on. And like, I don't know if he hired these models or what, but like, he goes up with like three, very beautiful, very well dressed women. And I thought, oh, this must be part of the show, right? They call me up. And it's just me and my mate. And we're just like, this feels less glamorous now. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it was just a funny moment because if you haven't seen the creative director on Yakuza,
He's
he
a
he's a very fun lad, but he dresses like
Nagochi.
the characters. Yeah, that
He's
you.
he's so incredible, that man. I'm
Mhm.
nothing but utter respect for Nagoshi and where
Yeah,
he was and where he is now. Incredible stuff.
dude, he is like such a funny dude as well. Like, because as I said, I didn't understand all of what he was saying because partly fluent in Japanese, but just seeing him control the room and just his charisma and people laughing and just it was very really cool to see. Very nice guy he seemed very much. So at the end we go and we go to go to get interviewed, and I'm just looking at nothing, and my friend's there and he's translating, and then he goes, "Oh, she says you got a very nice smile. It's very cute." And I was just like, "Am I about to hit on a VTuber here? Is this what's about to go down?" Like, I obviously didn't, just for the record for everyone. But the next funniest bit is like we have to hand the trophy back because it was just a ceremonial one, and I'm sure we got the trophy later. But it was just when I was like, "Oh, this is."
Fine now. I was going to fly home with this.
Yeah, that was my plan, right? That was I was like, "Hey, kind of a big deal." But alas, no. But they just again, just how different they are. We obviously got off track with the VTubers, but the
It's where life leads.
exactly, mate. If it's not about VTube, what are we doing with our
If
lives?
you're listening to this and you want to get into video games, that is the kind of stuff that will happen.
Yes, I tell you what though, it's like you said, when you go over there, it's such a for your first time, it's such an experience, right? Like the same with E3. I think I've been there 3 times, twice maybe, and again, when you're doing it and you're getting to represent your game, it is an amazing experience. So I try to tell everyone to take it in, regardless. We're joking around about some of the differences,
I
obviously.
still love it. I still
Yeah,
love going through those things, and even TGS. So, for as much as I don't like TGS, the show, I absolutely love the week leading up to TGS because everybody's in town. Like I love living in Japan, but I will admit, with a forgotten community now and again, we are the second major player next to America in terms of making games. From Japan, but in regards to like events, you know, not many people coming out to Japan, to be honest. Like TGS
no,
and Bit Summit are the two biggest ones, but even then, Bit Summit is on a tiny scale compared to something like PAX. So the week leading up to TGS, everybody's in town, and there's a couple of parties like the 8-4
mhm.
party and all those kind of things. And I live for that week. It is so great. The sad thing though is that at the end of that week, you have to go to TGS.
It is such a fascinating, like when you get to go and do all these, like meet people. That's brilliant. That is, as you said, it's the awesome part to
It's
it.
the best part, easily.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the main thing is if you are going to, we like I said, we have some different opinions on like different places, different cultures with things, but like it's do just make the most of it. If you get your chance, like really just try and take it all in because
Yeah.
especially in our industry, man, you never know. I mean, especially what's happened with the pandemic, but like you never know when or if you'll get to go again. So just love every chance you get.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like when I started at Rockstar and thinking about back then, there'd be no chance I would get to go to these places.
Hmm.
Only because I've sort of forged my own path do I then get to go to those places, and also just out of my own choice, right? Um, so it can be pretty rare. And then just remember that the one you go to could be your last. I mean, PAX West was the last for like almost everybody on
Yeah.
my side, and that was almost 2 years ago now. So it's kind of crazy to think, an industry that revolves on those things now can't do those things, can't see each other, can't have business partnerships. We're slowly evolving to do most of the things through online now, but there's still a big chunk that is missing, and they are wonderful. If you do, especially if you get to come to Japan, come to Bit Summit and you will just fall in love.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting where it goes, right, moving forward. As you said, Nintendo have their tree houses and everything they do online. It'll be interesting to see where that all goes, because I know some people speculate that we won't do these eventually because, right, it costs so much, right?
It costs a lot, and bad things can happen there sometimes,
Yeah.
because these parties happen around it, and it can be tough, but they are the way you get to know people, and that's how
Hmm.
you forge really long lasting business opportunities, right? I would not envy any game developer hobbyist right now trying to sell their game to a publisher and not being somewhat already known.
Hmm.
It's hard enough as it is, let alone just like turning up on Twitter and being like, hi, I have a game, and not having
Oh,
met people. It's really tough. It
it,
is really tough.
it is. I will say, I was very fortunate 'cause I'm working on a small. I say small, but my dream project.
I was gonna say Cyberpunk's not that small.
No, it wasn't Cyberpunk for a change. It was like a personal game that I wanted to work on. Yeah, the small indie stuff, but maybe you've heard of the studios, CD Projekt Red and Ubisoft. Just casual names. But I was happy because we had some nice concept art done. We put it out, screen share Saturday, or was it screen share Sunday? One of the two. And then having these places that do like roundups, and we got mentioned in a roundup, being like, "Oh, this is
Nice.
really nice," and things like that. So, again, like I said, I don't envy it too. Just do try, get out there and meet
Oh,
people, like you said.
absolutely. Don't let that deter you. I mean, it
Mhm.
might be harder, but not. It's definitely not impossible. And just posting your stuff on Twitter and getting it out there and following the the picture game and all that kind of stuff is really a great way of having people see your game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's how we started as friends. I think I messaged you for something, and we just started talking nonstop ever
Yeah,
since.
I can't even remember how it happened. It was just like, oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was, and that's the thing is, and you'll find most, not all, of course, but most game professionals are so willing to give you advice, or at least spend some time maybe looking at your tweet and looking at gifs of your game and stuff like that, and would be happy to give advice. But there's so much content out there now as well that you can just go and look for to get some advice as well,
Oh yeah,
um,
there's some great stuff out there.
like yourself, right?
Well, I didn't want to plug it, but plug it.
Hey,
There we are. A shame the name isn't sort of like you can mention it casually. Like, you ever thought about this lobby, a place where you meet to talk about level design? But
designing things because
that's
I got
enough.
a place for you.
All right, man. Well, we're gonna wrap this one up because it's been an hour, and even off air, it's been 2 hours.
It's been about 3 hours.
So I won't take any more of your time before your missus gets jealous or anything like that.
Thank
But
you. Yeah, it's almost midnight here in Japan, so yeah, it's getting pretty
okay,
late.
yeah, I'll let you get going then, champ. But I just say thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, the best place to go is just on Twitter, Liam BME. It's just my name, Liam, and then BME. It's an abbreviation of an old Xbox Live username I had once. That was embarrassing, but it's still there. So Liam BME, and then yeah, I do a podcast called Dad and Sons with the YouTuber Super Bunny Hop and Matt Visual every week that you can listen to. We talk about games, and I make games as well. But you can see all that on Twitter.
If you do want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so on Twitter. That is at MaxPairs. If you do want to email into the show, you can do so at leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. If you want to support the show to make sure that we constantly keep up the quality, please head over to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. Thank you all. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day or week. And I'll catch you all next time.